The royal banquet hall of the Vorlaxian Empire glittered with otherworldly splendor. Crystalline chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen supernovas, casting rainbow prisms across the gathered dignitaries from 17 star systems. At the head of the grand table sat Queen Zalera, her iridescent scales shifting between emerald and sapphire as she surveyed her guests with 6 golden eyes. Her exoskeleton crown rose in elegant spires above her elongated head, a biological symbol of power that had evolved over millennia of selective breeding among the Vorlaxian royalty. "More entertainment," she commanded, her voice resonating with harmonics that made the lesser species at the table flinch. "Bring in the next challenger." The massive doors at the far end of the hall swung open. A hulking figure from the Draconid Collective stomped forward, muscles rippling beneath crimson hide. The assembled guests murmured in appreciation. The Draconids were known throughout the galaxy as fearsome warriors, their natural armor and regenerative abilities making them nearly unstoppable in combat. Queen Zalera's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among her kind. "Who will face the mighty Draconid champion?" she called, already knowing the answer. This was a game she played at every diplomatic banquet, selecting champions from various worlds to demonstrate the superiority of her royal guard. It reinforced the Vorlaxian position at the top of the galactic hierarchy and reminded potential enemies why challenging her empire was futile. From the shadows behind her throne stepped Commander Vexlar, her most decorated warrior. Standing nearly 9 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and chitinous plating that could deflect energy weapons, he had never lost a challenge match. The Queen enjoyed watching the hope drain from the eyes of foreign diplomats as their champions fell. "Wait!" A voice cut through the anticipatory silence. All eyes turned toward the human delegation. They sat clustered at the far end of the table, the newest and least respected members of the galactic community. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their homeworld, Earth, was a backwater planet in an unremarkable solar system that a human female rose from her seat. She wore the blue formal attire of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps, her dark hair pulled back in severe style that accentuated sharp cheekbones and eyes that reflected the starlight like polished obsidian. "Ambassador Chun," Queen Zalera purred, "surely you don't wish to volunteer one of your companions for this demonstration?" The ambassador's expression remained neutral, though a slight tightening around her eyes betrayed her irritation. "Your Majesty, I believe we agreed this visit would establish peaceful relations between our species. These combat exhibitions seem counterproductive to that goal." Queen Zalera's antennae twitched in amusement. "My dear ambassador, this is merely sport, a cultural exchange, if you will. Surely your species understands the value of friendly competition." Her voice dripped with condescension. "Unless, of course, humans are too fragile for such activities." The insult hung in the air. The alien dignitaries shifted uncomfortably, many of them hiding smirks behind various appendages. The human delegation had been mocked throughout the 3-day summit, their physical capabilities dismissed as inferior, their technological achievements deemed primitive copies of superior designs. "We understand competition perfectly well, Your Majesty," Ambassador Chen replied evenly. Then she turned and nodded to someone seated further down the table that a man stood up. Unlike the other humans dressed in diplomatic finery, he wore a simple gray jumpsuit with minimal insignia. He was unremarkable in height and build compared to the towering aliens around him. His weathered face suggested middle age, with lines etched around eyes that had seen too much. "Captain Thomas Reeves, United Earth Defense Force." The man introduced himself with a slight bow that managed to convey respect without subservience. Queen Zalera couldn't contain her chittering laugh, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "You jest, Ambassador. This specimen is to face Commander Vexlar." She gestured dismissively. "He has no armor, no visible weaponry. He doesn't even possess secondary limbs." The banquet hall erupted in alien laughter. Even the Draconid challenger joined in, his roar of amusement shaking goblets on the table. Captain Reeves walked calmly to the center of the hall, seemingly unaffected by the mockery. He stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, waiting for the laughter to subside. "Your Majesty," he finally said, "on Earth we have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog." The Queen's translator implant struggled to convey the idiom, but she waved away the confusion. Very well, human. Your courage, however misplaced, is noted when you lose. Assuming you survive, perhaps your species will better understand its proper place in our galactic community. She signaled to an attendant who scurried forward with a selection of weapons. Choose your instrument of defeat. Captain Reeves studied the exotic array of blades, energy projectors, and neural disruptors. After a moment, he shook his head. No weapons, thank you. A shocked silence fell over the hall. You wish to face Commander Vexlar unarmed. Queen Zalera's voice rose in pitch, her surprise evident. I do. The Queen's mandibles clicked rapidly, the relaxing equivalent of a shrug. Your funeral rites will be respected according to human custom. The court herald moved to the center of the room. The rules are simple. Combat continues until submission, incapacitation, or... He paused dramatically. Other final outcomes. There are no prohibited tactics. Commander Vexlar moved to stand opposite the human. The size difference was almost comical. The Relaxian warrior towered over Captain Reeves, his four arms flexing menacingly, each one capable of crushing steel. Last chance to forfeit human, growled the commander, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into rough, standard galactic. Captain Reeves rolled his shoulders and shifted his stance slightly. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle change in weight distribution that only the most observant might notice. I appreciate your concern, he replied with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ambassador Chin watched from her seat, her composed expression betraying nothing of her thoughts. The other human delegates exchanged glances but remained silent. Begin, announced a herald. Stepping quickly away from the combatants, Commander Vexlar didn't hesitate. He launched forward with surprising speed for his size, all four arms extended in attack positions. The gathered dignitaries leaned forward expectantly, anticipating the swift conclusion to this mismatch. What happened next would change the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. Captain Reeves didn't retreat. He didn't cower or flinch. Instead, he moved toward the charging alien with fluid precision that seemed impossible for a being with only two legs. Just as Commander Vexlar's leading arm swung downward in what should have been a devastating blow, the human wasn't there anymore. And then somehow, the massive Relaxian warrior was airborne. The sound of his armored body crashing to the floor echoed to the stunned banquet hall like a thunderclap. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Commander Vexlar lay sprawled on his back, mandibles slack with shock. The Vorlaxian royal guard shifted nervously, their claws twitching toward ceremonial weapons that suddenly seemed less ceremonial. Captain Reeves had already reset his stance, feet planted shoulder-width apart, hands open and relaxed at his sides. His breathing remained steady, as if he'd done nothing more strenuous than walk across the room. Queen Zalera rose from her throne, her scales flashing crimson with rage. What trickery is this? She demanded, her harmonics spiking so sharply that several crystal goblets shattered. No trickery, Your Majesty, Ambassador Chin replied calmly. Just physics and training. The fallen commander scrambled to his feet, his pride clearly wounded more than his body, his compound eyes fixed on the human with newfound wariness. The Draconid challenger who had been waiting his turn let out a low rumble, reassessing the unassuming human with professional interest. Continue, Queen Zalera commanded, settling back into her throne with visible effort to control her anger. This time, her voice carried a dangerous edge that made even her own courtiers flinch. Commander Vexlar circled the human cautiously. His previous recklessness had vanished, replaced by the calculated approach that had made him the Queen's champion. He feinted with his lower right arm, watching for a reaction. Captain Reeves shifted almost imperceptibly, his weight balanced perfectly between both feet. His eyes never left Commander, but neither did they focus on any single point. He seemed to be watching everything at once. Your species has had so little time among the stars, Commander Vexlar said, continuing his careful orbit around the human. 50 years is nothing. My bloodline has served the Vorlaxian throne for 20 millennia. The commander struck suddenly, two arms sweeping low, while a third jabbed directly at the human's face. This time his attack was precisely coordinated, leaving seemingly no avenue of escape. Again, Captain Reeves moved in ways that defied expectation. He stepped into the attack rather than away from it, his hands blurring as they redirected the commander's momentum. What should have been a devastating combination ended with Vexlar stumbling forward, off balance and vulnerable. The human could have pressed his advantage with decisive counter, but he merely stepped back, resuming his ready stance. This restraint seemed to infuriate the commander more than any attack could have. "Fight me properly, human," he snarled. "I am—" Reeves replied simply, from her position at the diplomatic table. Ambassador Chen watched the exchange with the careful neutrality of someone who had anticipated this outcome but couldn't afford to appear smug. Beside her, the junior diplomats were less skilled at hiding their reactions. One young man gripped the edge of the table, so hard his knuckles had turned white. "Chun!" The Queen's voice sliced through the tension as the combatants continued their deadly dance. "Your warrior moves like no species I've encountered. Explain." The ambassador met the Queen's six-eyed gaze steadily. "Humans evolve on a high-gravity world with thousands of apex predators, Your Majesty. Throughout our history, we developed hundreds of combat systems, each adapted to specific threats and environments." As if to illustrate her point, Captain Reeves flowed beneath another of the commander's attacks, this time allowing one of Vexlar's massive fists to barely graze his shoulder before using that point of contact to disrupt the alien's balance again. "For most of our existence," Jin continued, "we fought each other more than any external threat. War was our constant companion. What you're witnessing is the distillation of thousands of years of human conflict." The Queen's antennae quivered with what might have been skepticism or fascination. A species that turns violence against itself rarely survives to achieve spaceflight. "We nearly didn't," the ambassador acknowledged. "But what almost destroyed us also forged us." Captain Reeves represents that duality. The captain himself remains silent, focused entirely on the increasingly frustrated commander. Vexlar had now abandoned all pretense of caution, unleashing a barrage of strikes that would have overwhelmed any opponent the Queen had previously seen. Yet the human slipped between the attacks like water flowing around stones, redirecting force rather than opposing it directly. Where the Relaxian relied on his superior strength and reach, Reeves used precision and timing. When he did strike, his blows targeted joints and pressure points with surgical accuracy. I end the diplomatic section. The young aide leaned toward Ambassador Chun. "This is exactly what we were warned to avoid," he whispered urgently. "The Queen will never accept an alliance now." "Patience, Davis," Chun murmured back. "There's something you need to understand about the Vorlaxians. They respect only one thing more than strength." Before she could elaborate, a collective gasp rippled through the banquet hall. Commander Vexlar had managed to trap the human in a grapple using all four arms, lifting Captain Reeves off the floor in what appeared to be an inescapable hold. "Now we end this farce," the commander hissed, tightening his grip. Queen Zalera's mandibles clicked rapidly in approval. Her champion had finally demonstrated the natural superiority of their species. Several of the alien dignitaries were already exchanging knowing glances, as if this outcome had been inevitable. But Captain Reeves wasn't struggling against the crushing embrace. Instead, his expression remained calm, almost attached, as he executed a series of precise movements that seemed impossible given his constrained position. He twisted in ways that made several observers wince, applying pressure to specific points on the commander's exoskeleton. Suddenly, inexplicably, it was Vexlar who was gasping for breath, his grip faltering. The human slipped from his grasp, landing lightly on his feet as the commander staggered backward, two of his arms hanging uselessly at his sides. "What have you done to me?" Vexlar demanded, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time. "Temporary nerve compression," Captain Reeves explained quietly. "Function will return in approximately 5 minutes. No permanent damage." The revelation that the human understood Relaxian physiology well enough to temporarily disable Commander without injuring him sent another shock wave through the assembled guests. This wasn't just combat prowess. This was knowledge that should have been impossible for such a newly contacted species. Queen Zalera's scale shifted to a deep purple, a color rarely seen on Relaxian royalty. Her inner eyelids flickered rapidly as she processed this development. "Ambassador Chun," she said finally, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. I believe there's much about humanity that has been omitted from our briefings. Chin inclined her head slightly. Just as there's much about the Relaxian Empire that remains unknown to us, Your Majesty. Perhaps that is why these diplomatic exchanges are so valuable. In the Senate Hall, the combat continued, though now it seemed less like a fight and more like a demonstration. Each time Commander Vexlar attacked, Captain Reeves would counter in a slightly different way, showcasing techniques that left the alien observers murmuring in astonishment. The exhibition had gone on for nearly 15 minutes, an eternity in combat terms. Commander Vexlar's movements had grown increasingly desperate, his attacks wilder. Sweat glistened on Captain Reeves' forehead, but his breathing remained controlled, his movements economical. He hadn't landed a single decisive blow, yet the commander appeared exhausted, his exoskeleton heaving with labored breaths. Enough. Queen Zalera's voice cut through the tension. This has become instructive. Her choice of words carried layers of meaning that weren't lost on the diplomatic corps. Among Verlaxians, to acknowledge learning from another species was rare. Captain Reeves stepped back immediately, offering a respectful nod to both the Queen and the commander. Vexlar, however, didn't seem ready to accept the interruption. Your Majesty, he protested, mandibles clicking in agitation. I have not yet. You have shown admirable resilience, Commander, the Queen interrupted smoothly. But I believe we have all witnessed enough to draw our conclusions. The massive doors of the far end of the banquet hall swung open once more. A Verlaxian messenger rushed in, moving with the urgent gait that immediately silenced all conversation. The insectoid alien approached the Queen and whispered something that caused her scales to flush a deep, alarming crimson. Ambassador Chen leaned forward slightly, her diplomatic training insufficient to completely master concern. Whatever news had arrived, it had transformed the atmosphere in the room from tense appreciation to something far more ominous. Queen Zalera rose to her full height, towering over her servants. It appears, she announced, her harmonics resonating with barely controlled fury, that while we've been engaged in diplomatic pleasantries, a human vessel has been detected in restricted space near the sacred nursery worlds. A collective gasp rippled through the alien delegations. The nursery worlds were the Relaxian equivalent of holy sites, planets where their young were nurtured in carefully controlled environments, protected from all outside influence until maturity. Ambassador Chen's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyes found Captain Reeves across the room. Something unspoken passed between them. Ambassador, the Queen continued, her gaze boring into Chun, perhaps you would care to explain this violation of our most sacred territories? Your Majesty, Chen replied smoothly, rising from her seat. I assure you the United Earth government has authorized no such incursion. If a human vessel is indeed present in your sovereign space, it must be investigated thoroughly before assumptions are made. The Queen's antennae quivered with barely suppressed rage. A convenient response, almost as convenient as your warrior's unexpected skills. Her mandibles clicked rapidly. One might wonder if this demonstration was meant to distract us from something more strategic. Captain Reeves cleared his throat. All eyes in the room turned to him. Your Majesty, with respect, I volunteer to accompany your forces to investigate this incursion. If humans are responsible, I will ensure they answer for this violation. The Queen's 6 eyes narrowed simultaneously. You would place yourself in the custody of those you have just humiliated in combat? Bold, Captain, or perhaps foolish. Neither, Your Majesty. Just practical. His calm demeanor remained unshaken. If this is a misunderstanding, my presence might prevent unnecessary escalation. If it's an actual violation by my people, then having a UEDF officer present would be advantageous for all parties. Commander Vexlar stepped forward. Your Majesty, I request permission to personally escort the human captain on this mission. The request hung in the air, heavy with implications. Was this an offer born of professional respect, or did the commander seek revenge away from diplomatic witnesses? Queen Zalera's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep indigo, a shade that none of the human delegation could interpret with confidence. An excellent suggestion, Commander. Prepare your fastest vessel. Her eyes swept back to Captain Reeves. You have 1 hour to communicate with your superiors, Captain. Then you will accompany my commander to investigate this coincidence. Ambassador Chin stood. As Earth's representative, I must insist on joining this expedition. Denied, Ambassador. The Queen's tone left no room for negotiation. You are far too valuable to risk on such a mission. You will remain here as my honored guest. The slight pause before honored sent a chill through the human delegation. Captain Reeves and Ambassador Chin exchanged another look. This one longer, laden with unspoken contingencies and protocols. Years of working together had given them a shorthand that required no words. Very well. Chin conceded with practiced diplomatic grace. Captain Reeves has my full confidence to represent Earth's interests in this matter. As servants began ushering the dignitaries from the banquet hall, Commander Vexlar approached Captain Reeves. The two warriors stood face to face, predator to predator, neither yielding an inch. I hope you're as skilled in space as you are in personal combat, human. The commander said quietly, because where we're going, your fancy footwork won't save you. The Verlaxian military vessel cut through space like a predatory insect, all angles and gleaming chitin-inspired alloys. Inside the command center, Captain Reeves stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back as he observed the alien crew at work. Their movements were precise, coordinated with an efficiency that spoke of rigorous training and hierarchical discipline. Commander Vexlar sat in a command chair, his posture rigid, all four arms manipulating different control interfaces simultaneously. We approached the coordinates, Vexlar announced, not bothering to look at the human. Sensors detect a vessel matching human configurations, but its signature is unusual. Reeves stepped forward, careful to respect the invisible boundaries that had been established around each crew member station. May I see the readings, Commander? After a moment's hesitation, Vexlar gestured to a secondary display. The data scrolled in Verlaxian script, but a small concession to diplomacy had been made. A translation band appeared at the bottom of the screen. Reeves studied the information, his brow furrowing slightly. That's not right, he muttered, almost to himself. Explain, demanded Vexlar. The configuration is human, yes, but it's outdated. That a deep exploration design from our first wave of interstellar vessels, nearly 40 years ago. We haven't used that propulsion system since before first contact with the Draconic Collective. The commander's compound eyes fixed on Reeves, searching for deception. Perhaps your government maintains older vessels for special operations? Possible, but unlikely, Reeves replied evenly. Those early drives were inefficient and left signature radiation trails that made them easy to track. We'd never use one for covert operations, especially not in contested space. A sharp series of clicks came from one of the sensor officers. Commander Vexlar responded with his own sequence of mandible movements before turning back to Reeves. We're being hailed, he said, by your vessel. The main view screen activated, revealing a face that caused Captain Reeves to freeze in place. The woman on screen wore an outdated United Earth uniform, her features weathered by age and hardship, but still recognizable. Captain Sarah Reeves, U.S. Pathfinder, she introduced herself. Identify yourselves and state your intention. The silence that followed was absolute. Every Vorlaxian I swiveled between the human on their bridge and the human on their screen. Thomas. The woman's professional demeanor cracked slightly, her eyes widening in shock. Thomas, is that you? Mom. The word escaped Captain Reeves' lips before he could stop himself. He stepped forward, professionalism momentarily forgotten. That's impossible. The Pathfinder was declared lost with all hands 28 years ago. I was 12 when you... 28 years? The woman looked genuinely confused. No, that can't be right. We've been in deep space for just over 3 years. We encountered an anomaly near the Horsehead Nebula that... She stopped abruptly, reassessing the situation. Who are these aliens? Are you their prisoner? Commander Vexlar rose from his command chair, all four arms tensed. You claim to be from a vessel lost almost 3 decades ago, yet you appear here, now, near our most protected space? His voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Captain Reeves, explain this deception immediately. Reeves struggled to process what he was seeing. There's no deception, Commander, The Pathfinder was one of our first deep-range exploratory vessels. It disappeared during an early survey mission. My mother was its captain. He turned back to the screen. Mom, listen to me carefully. Somehow you've lost 25 years. I don't know how, but right now you're in Verlaxian protected space, near their nursery worlds. This is a serious diplomatic situation. The woman, Sarah Reeves, straightened her shoulders, the momentary shock giving way to the composure of a seasoned officer. I understand. We detected unusual stellar formations and came to investigate. We had no knowledge of any territorial claims in this region. She paused. Thomas, you've grown up. You're wearing a captain's insignia. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the Verlaxian vessel. Commander Vexlar barked orders to his crew, his movements becoming increasingly agitated as reports came in. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. Called out a sensor officer. Configurations unknown. The view screen split to show a new image alongside Sarah Reeves' face. A swirling vortex had opened in space, less than 1,000 kilometers from the Pathfinder. From its depths emerged vessels unlike anything Captain Reeves had ever seen, organic-looking ships with pulsing membranes and crystalline protrusions. The Vexlar turned to Reeves, his mandibles clicking furiously. Another of your human tricks? More lost relatives, perhaps. No, Reeves responded, his eyes fixed on the emerging threat. We've never encountered anything like that. Sarah Reeves' voice came through clearly despite growing interference. Thomas, we've seen these before. They followed us through the anomaly. They're the reason we've been running all this time. 3 hours later, Captain Thomas Reeves stood in the royal chamber aboard the Verlaxian flagship, his uniform scorched and torn in several places. Beside him stood his mother, Captain Sarah Reeves, looking both out of time and out of place in her vintage Earth uniform. Across from them, Queen Zalera reclined on her mobile throne, her scales shifting between thoughtful blue and cautious amber. Commander Vexlar stood at her right side, 2 of his 4 arms now bandaged from injuries sustained in the battle. Your actions today were unexpected, the Queen stated, breaking the heavy silence. When the Void Harvesters breached our defensive perimeter, I believe the nursery worlds were lost. Thomas nodded respectfully. The Pathfinder's outdated systems gave us an advantage, Your Majesty. The Harvesters couldn't detect its targeting systems, allowing Captain Reeves to position perfectly for the flanking maneuver. Mother and son. Queen Zalera clicked her mandibles in what might have been amusement, fighting in perfect synchronization, despite a 28-year separation. Most improbable. Sarah Reeves stepped forward slightly. Your Majesty, in my experience, the improbable is merely the unexplained waiting for understanding. The time dilation we experience near the anomaly is scientifically explicable, even if beyond our current physics. The Void Harvesters pursuing us through that same anomaly is unfortunate, but not mystical. The Queen's antennae twitched. You speak directly for someone who has missed decades of diplomatic protocol development. Time may have passed differently for me, Your Majesty, but human straightforwardness remains constant, Sarah replied with a hint of smile. For the first time since they had met, Thomas saw Commander Vexlar's mandibles shift in what the translation guides described as a Verlaxian smile. The nursery worlds are safe, the Queen acknowledged. Your intervention prevented catastrophe. The combined tactics of Verlaxian precision and human adaptability proved effective against the Harvesters. Thomas exchanged a glance with his mother. Both recognized the significance of what the Queen had just said. Acknowledging a complementary strength in another species was virtually unprecedented in Verlaxian diplomatic history. Your Majesty, Thomas began carefully. The Harvesters retreated, but our analysis suggests they'll return. They seem drawn to certain energy signatures common in both our technologies. This may not be the last time our species face this threat. Queen Zalera's scales rippled thoughtfully. Indeed, which brings us to the matter at hand. She straightened to her full height, her exoskeleton crown catching the light dramatically. Ambassador Chen has proposed an interesting amendment to our diplomatic negotiations, a joint defense initiative specifically designed to counter the Harvester threat. It's a sound strategy, Commander Vexlar added, surprising everyone by offering support. The humans' unpredictable combat approaches complement our disciplined formations. Today's battle demonstrated that clearly. And what of the Pathfinder and her crew? Sarah asked, getting to the heart of her concern. We've been lost for 3 decades. Most of us have families who mourned us and moved on. The Queen's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. That is a human matter, but the Relaxian Empire acknowledges its debt. Whatever resources you require for reintegration will be provided. Your vessel's unique properties may also prove valuable in understanding the harvesters. Thomas felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. When he'd volunteered for this diplomatic mission, he never imagined finding his mother, battling interdimensional predators, and forging a genuine alliance with the notoriously xenophobic Relaxians. There's one more matter, the Queen continued, her voice taking on a formal tone. Captain Thomas Reeves stepped forward. Thomas complied, standing at attention before the alien monarch. In 20,000 years of Relaxian history, no off-world has ever been granted the mark of respect. The Queen gestured, and a servant approached with an ornate box. Your actions in the combat circle were impressive, but it was your willingness to risk your life protecting our nursery worlds, despite our previous discourtesy, that has earned this honor. The box opened to reveal a medallion of iridescent material that seemed to shift and flow like the Queen's scales. The mark signifies not just respect, but understanding. Queen Zalera explained as the medallion was placed around Thomas's neck. Perhaps humans and Relaxians are not so different after all. We both protect our young fiercely, fight with everything we have, and, most surprisingly, know when to set aside pride for survival. As the ceremonial chimes signaled the end of the audience, Thomas and Sarah Reeves walked side by side toward the chambers where Ambassador Chin waited. Years of questions and answers lay ahead of them, a lifetime of catching up compressed into whatever time they had. So, Sarah said quietly as they walked, a captain, just like your old mom. Thomas smiled. I had a good example to follow, even when I thought she was gone. Behind them, Commander Vexlar watched the humans apart. Remarkable creatures, he muttered to no one in particular. So physically unimpressive, yet so unexpectedly formidable. He flexed his injured arms, remembering the combat circle and the lesson it taught him. Never judge a species by its appearance, especially humans.